Welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 78. Tonight I'm going to be talking about the Kippford Mermaid. Let me just show you a quick picture. Nope, not that one. We do that one and that one. Yes, we will get there eventually. So I'm going to be talking about the creation of this photo and several that went along with it for a group called The Art's End of Somewhere. So that's one of the main things I'm going to be talking about. What we've also got coming up after I chat about this and the story behind it and some of the things that happened in with how it was photographed and also how it was edited. I'm going to be chatting, looking at the critique section. We've had half a dozen people send in images. So we have, no, not that. Where are we? That. Let's try that. Yes. So Russ is being commissioned to start taking baby photos. Made a great start, wanting to know some ideas or some thoughts about the whole approach to it. So going to kind of explore a few ideas with that, I think. Then we've got Jim was out taking a photo, and whilst this sort of apple on a post was supposed to be the main part of it, it kind of turned out too dark. He wasn't sure about the exposure and quite how it's worked out. So looking for a little bit of advice on that. So we'll be talking about that. Michele took a beautiful flower in the rain, rose with the raindrops on it, but isn't really keen on the background and is wondering what kind of options could be explored with that. Roy found this notice of a fish and then noticed the reflection in the water. So sort of set about creating that. Wasn't quite sure whether it worked. Wondered if there's kind of anything that needs to be thought about with that. Robert has been returning to one of his favourite people to photograph, taken a new one, done a lot to it, is wondering if there's maybe anything I would have done differently. And Garry took this photo into the sunset. This is this is his edited version. He sent me the original, but he's kind of feeling that he was really struggling with in Lightroom to get it as bright as he wanted without sort of losing bits and pieces. So he's wondering what you can do with this in Photoshop. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So that's what we've got on offer tonight. Do hope you'll stick around. So this is us here on what's this? Suddenly, oh, I don't know. It's now talking about different bit rates on the audio stream. Hoping I'm coming across okay. Anyway, here we are, live, YouTube. Let me know you're here. I can see there's some comments here already. I should probably start working my way through them if I can find my glasses. Tell me where you're from. And it looks like quite a few people are sort of giving up a bit of a weather forecast as well, where they are. So tell me where in the world you are and what the weather's doing. So let's take a little look. So what have we got? Oh, well, so Pat was here first saying, Somerset is beautiful. The weather spell has broken and it's cold and wet. Evening all. Oh, sorry. Somerset's beautiful weather spell has broken and now it's cold and wet. Right. So it's not beautiful down in Somerset anymore. It was, but it's gone. Jim is likewise talking from rather damp and dark Dumfries. Roy is saying, hello everyone from a cold and wet Yorkshire. Oh, Pat says, Kim will brighten our spirits. I will try my best, Pat. Robert from Texas says, howdy. Maggie says, good evening all. VG says, good evening from India. Max says, good evening all. Brian says, hi from a damp Dumfries. Rosemary says, good morning / afternoon / evening, everyone. So Rosemary over in Pacific Northwest, I think she said. So in America is obviously kind of taking into consideration that there's lots of different time zones tuning in today. Jack says hi all from Wisconsin. Meg is saying good evening to everyone. Max still worrying about the fact that I have this on here and saying it's not being repaired, and no, it isn't going to be. You weren't listening last time, obviously. Rosie says hello everyone from the Isle of Whithorn. Jackie's here tuned in from South Africa. And Stacey says, good afternoon. Rainy and cloudy in Pennsylvania. Russ is here from a very wet South Gloucestershire. Barb is saying hello from Scotland. Glad you could make it along, Barb. Finally, Robert says 18 degrees in Texas just now, sunny and beautiful. So the only place that seems to be reporting sunshine at the moment is Texas. So, well, that's fine. If it's damp and miserable outdoors, where better can you be than sitting here for the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres podcast. So, thank you everyone. It looks like we've got a great crowd in tonight. If you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, but you'd like to support them in some way, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Certainly one way you can support me. Another is invite your friends along as well. Let's grow the community. That's not very good. Slightly breathing in the water. Not designed for that. Okay, so let's make a start then. So what I wanted to talk about tonight was a project called the Kippford Mermaid. I briefly showed you the photo and we'll come back to that. So in essence, what happened was I was approached by Heather from PAMIS, which is Promoting a More Inclusive Society. So PAMIS, Scotland. And one of their offshoots, and other things Heather's in charge of, is a group called The Arts End of Somewhere. And The Arts End of Somewhere is a sort of theatre creative group workshop for people with acronym PMLD, Profound Multiple Learning Disabilities. And essentially, they'd created, one of the projects they'd done was to create a book called The Kippford Mermaid. Now, Kippford is a small coastal village not too far from here, about sort of 10, 12 miles from where I live. And there's a legend of a mermaid and a sailor, and they set about creating a book. And each of the members, there's about 7 people who take part in this group, and each of them drew a couple and painted a couple of pages for it, and then when it was all put together, Curly Tail Books published it. And here's a copy. Here's the Kippford Mermaid, and let's sort of show you some of the pictures. Now, the thing is, with over and above this being a rather wonderful sort of children's book, it's also a multi-sensory story. And the idea for this is it is aimed at, well, not just children. It's aimed at people who maybe are suffering from particular disabilities and enjoy the stimulation of more than one kind. It's not just about visual. So next to each of the pictures, there's these wonderful sensory activities that you can that you can create as well. So on this page, one day the sailor was at sea just off the coast of Kippford, and there was a terrible storm. And sensory activity, so you can make a rain stick, and it tells you how to, you can use pens or paints to decorate a kitchen roll tube, seal one end of the tube with masking tape, pour rice into the tube and fill it just over halfway. Seal the open end with masking tape, decorate the masking tape, and shake your rain stick to make the sound of rain. How fantastic is that? Or the mermaid was sad because the sailor had a wife and 2 children at home. So pretend you are sad like the mermaid. You could pretend to make a crying sound or make an unhappy face and pretend to wipe away the tears. You could even blow your nose. So there's lots of little extra activities that you can do while reading and taking part in the book. So it's truly wonderful. So it was coming up to the book. There was a book launch. In fact, there was 2 book launches. There was one up at the Edinburgh Book Festival. And but I think that one was done mostly on a virtual level, and then there was a real live book launch happened in Dumfries a few weeks ago. Prior to that, then, what Heather was wanting was to get a promotional photo shoot, and we sat down and we talked and we bounced ideas about, and there was the idea, well, some of the members could dress up as sailors and mermaids, and we could do a shot. Now, initially, the idea was made, I suppose you sort of have them all standing there, holding a copy of the book or whatever. But I said, well, okay, could we go a bit further? Could we play with this idea? And ideas got bounced backwards and forwards. And we decided to sort of try and create something a bit more theatrical, to kind of create and set a scene. And in the end, let me double click on that and switch this across. So this was the photo we created. Now, just to show you the set, if I do that, that shows you what it looked like essentially to everyone else. That's this is the edited version, obviously, but essentially what I've done here is I've got lights set up in a particular way. So first of all, just again, a little bit of backstory with this. We had a whole here are our 7 models. These are the people who these are the users and members of the arts end of somewhere, plus me, full of beard, setting the lights up. We've got our sailors, we've got our mermaids, and we've got a set. So this happened in the Baptist church in Dumfries. They kindly lent us a space, great big room, and what I did was we set up these props. Our good friend Simon came in with a whole bunch of things from because he plays with Viking ships and all sorts of bits and pieces, and so we had props like we've got a sail, we've got netting, we've got old lamps, there's an oar, there's bits of rope, all these kind of things. So we decided to sort of create this little set, and then by putting it in the middle of the room, what I then did was I essentially, with the settings on the camera, dialed down the exposure settings so that if you just went click, it was almost completely black. Very little was showing up. And then what happened was I set the flashes off so that was what lit everything. And if you go back to here, then you can see the people here are now the background, the moon and the stars have been put in afterwards, as has the beach. I will come back to that, but what we can see here from the setup is over above them, I've got this large softbox hanging above, and that is to sort of give that sense of moonlight. Over here we had a lamp, and behind this lamp I put an off-camera flash with an orange gel on it. And if we take a look here, sorry, wrong one, this one, you can see the lamp lit here, and you can see the light falling on the upper right is coming from that softbox that I showed you. And then but the thing is that lamp itself wasn't enough, so I had another umbrella with bouncing another flash with an orange gel on it to create more orange light coming from that direction, so that, wrong one again, so that you can see much more in the way of yellows kind of kicking into the side there. So you naturally assume that all that light is coming off the lamp. Only some of it is. Most of it is actually coming off the flash bouncing off the umbrella just to the left of them. So that was the way that I decided to set up the light. This is one of those things whereby it was a really big production in terms of the number of people we had involved. Because we had each of our models. We had people who came in and volunteered as to do hair, makeup, costume, help with the props. Friend Izzy, who I was mentoring at the time with photography, she came and took some behind-the-scenes photos as well. In fact, I think she took this one. And then you had a few parents and carers and everything. And in the end, here we go. This was the kind of full crew shot. This sort of shows you the number of people we had involved, all pitching in. And this doesn't include Simon, who actually lent us the props. So it was rather cool. Sorry. My computer is suddenly leaping about all over the place, changing things. And I seem to have... Right, okay. Let me flick back here a sec and just double check that you're still connected, because everything went off on this end. Right, looks like you probably are. That's cool, okay. Let's go back. So, you can see then we've got a big crew, and you can now see how the sort of lighting is working in the way that it was with the shop. So it was a lot of fun. once we got the setup, we thought, well, okay, we also want to do individual photos of all our wonderful sailors and mermaids as well. So, oh, right, okay, that's vanished. Where's that come from? Right, okay, so, and what we wanted to, now the sailors were fairly straightforward. I could do them into the same setting, but the mermaids we decided I would try and do something underwater. And so let me just briefly show you so here we have Sky being a mermaid. We've got Courtney as a sailor. We've got India being a mermaid. Faye as one of our sailors. Sarah, mermaid. Katie, sailor. And Zoe, our mermaid as well. Huge amount of fun, huge amount of work to try and create these. Now, the likes of this one with Zoe, basically, I shot against the green screen. And in my naivety and innocence, I thought that would just make everything really easy. And it probably made it slightly easier than if I photographed her against a really complicated background, but not much. In the end, it turned out to be quite a nightmare trying to cut out everything. I've not done a lot of green screen photography, so I was really learning on the job here. However, we can see here that was the kind of setup that we did for this. So what I'm going to do in a minute is I will talk you through some of the editing processes of what I did to get to, well, both to create the mermaid and to create that main shot. But but before we get to that, I'll just double check if we've got any more comments. So where we go? Oh, Stacey was saying it was a beautiful day. Sorry, it was beautiful earlier, but we're in for severe storms. Hopefully not like the 3 weeks ago with tornadoes. That definitely sounds a bit rough there, Stacey. Oh, VG says it's 29 degrees at 10 past midnight in India. That's warm. It doesn't really get 29 degrees here in Scotland ever. Buddha Mammy says, hi Kim, it's Sarah's mum. And she's the wee blonde mermaid. So glad you could make it along. Okay, Stacey says, very cute. Arts End, excited to be here. We love our photos. Excellent, so glad you're here. VG says the book looks colourful and very cheerful. John from Ohio has turned up and says, hello everyone. Rosie says that looks like a good book for my grandchildren. VG says final output is brilliant, from indoors to gorgeous outdoors. Lovely Kim, unbelievable. Michele says hi everyone, had trouble signing in here now though. Glad you can make it along, Michele. I will be talking about your photo a bit later. Rosemary says so clever. I am impressed by the imagination that carries the pull from the pull back to the finished photo. I bet your models were absolutely delighted with the results. And they really were. As Arts End just said, it was a magical day. Buddha Mummy says it was an amazing day. Honestly, I was so happy with how Kim managed to capture Sarah smiling. Such a talented and patient man. Wow, shucks, I'll just have a wee smug moment. Jim says very clever and worthwhile, impressive. And Max says very interesting insight. Excellent. Yeah, it really was an amazing day. And one of the things about the photography, when I'm doing this kind of photography, I say it so often to clients that it now sort of trips off the tongue to a point whereby I'm barely aware of saying it, which is when I'm doing one of these big stage narrative photos, it's not just about the photos, it's about the experience of gaining the photos, which becomes really important. And I know this and I say it, and it's very true. The process of going through, whether you're doing hair and makeup or finding props or finding locations, all these kind of things really contribute so that when you end up with a photo, although the photo is what you set out to do, it's almost a sort of beneficial side effect of creating the photo. It's the creativity and the whole everybody pulling together and finding ways of making it happen that become the amazing experience. But one of the things, the feedback I've had since with this is of the women who were involved, members of the group who were involved, is just how profound it was for them to have that photo taken. Most of them, very few of them have ever actually really been involved in photo shoots before. let alone be sort of sat down and do hair and makeup and costumes and get involved in something. And I found this at the book launch, a couple of them were talking about their experiences, and I found it incredibly moving. So it was really lovely to be, it was a fantastic project to be involved in. It also helped my daughter Meg knew half of them as well, which, so when we did the day, Meg came along to be an assistant as well, so that was fun. Russ says, superb group shot. I'm particularly impressed with the shadows on the beach under the tails, etc. Stacey says, I believe it's a rewarding experience to show such an elaborate piece of work. Right, okay, so what I'm going to do now then is I'm going to show you a little bit about the editing processes, because, I mean, obviously, it's a photography podcast. Now, part of this is about, you don't have to, for those who are already into Photoshop, I think you'll find the stages interesting. But I think even if you're not a photographer or you're not into Photoshop and editing, I think it's kind of fun to see the stages that you go through in order to end up with a photo like this. Because, I mean, anybody who is who does photography a lot knows one of the things you're constantly up against is people tend to think that all you do is turn up, go click. And that's all photography is. And somehow the reason, and yet my photos seem to be better than theirs. So why is that? Well, maybe I've just got a better camera, or maybe I've got Photoshop and that allows me to just click a button which says improve photo, and bam, it magically improves. A lot of people have no real idea of how much goes on behind the scenes. Part of the talking about, you've already seen just how much went into creating the photo shoot, but once that whole day and everything that built up to creating that day basically just gave me the raw material to then take back to the computer and polish up and turn it into a photo. So what I want to do is, I should have opened Photoshop earlier, but I'll just get that one opening now. So what I'm going to do is I'll with both pictures, both the main one and one of the mermaids. I think I'll take Zoe the mermaid because in the end, yes, that one of Zoe in her wheelchair as a mermaid is my favourite. Part of that was because it was also the most difficult to create. But what I will do is I will show you the stages that essentially it went through in order to create the Kippford Mermaid photo. So you've seen the end version. And so if I flip over here now, now what's happened? Let me just, right, I've realised I'm sitting down the bottom here, whereas I should be on the top. Right, please bear with me just for a few moments while I want to do that there. I want to drag that up over there. Yes. Hopefully now, let me just, hopefully now you should see me in the top right corner. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I do apologise for this, but I do need to just quickly check that I am. Yes, I am. I'm in the right place. Okay, cool. That's what I needed. So now I'm in the top right corner. I shouldn't be getting in the way of the picture, which was the main thing I wanted to talk about. So here we are then. Here's the unedited version. This is our starting point of the photo. So what you can see in here then is we've got blue carpet, we've got the props, we've got people sitting around, we've got people lit, we've got sail in the background. I don't know how well it's coming across, but you can see boards and bits and pieces in the background that are just getting slightly caught into the light. And also see that we've got the lamp here where I've got the off-camera flash behind it as well, but it's glowing very, very brightly. So this was the starting point. Now, next thing I did was, one of the first things is that whilst this was basically the thing that I want, the shape that I wanted, there were these three people in the centre weren't quite how I wanted them. There was another photo which looked better. I mean, here Courtney is kind of lost in the shadow. We're losing a little bit of Zoe's face. She's just turned around a bit too much. And there was another shot which had Faye here gesturing with her hand, and I preferred that. So what I did was I took them out and I placed them in. So again, that's the one that was, and I photoshopped from one photo into this one. And now we can see in this one, it's more light on Courtney's face, and I like the gesture in Faye's hand coming up, and we got a little bit more of the side of Zoe's face. So this is already then a composite of two photos. Then the next thing was this light, this lamp, as the way that it sat in the composition just now felt a bit too far away. There's a big gap here, and I wanted to sort of, so I took that and moved it closer. I cut it out and shoved it in. So, and then of course I've got little bits left at the back here of the underneath, and so I kind of covered that up. Now the next bit I worked on was the sail, because one of the things we noticed with the sail is it's got all these bits of symbols and writing on here which didn't really mean anything. So I thought, well, what we've got to do here, we need to remove that. So that took a lot of messing about, playing around with the patch tool and all these healing brushes and what have you, in order to essentially remove that. Where you don't actually remove it, what you do is you paint over it. You take one part of the sail and you paint it over another part of the sail, and you keep doing that until all the symbols which are on there have been essentially painted over. Now at this point then, we've also got quite a bit of stuff going on in the background, so I needed to blur that down, paint that out, so the background is now no longer interfering. Next thing I do is I've got the lamp, and I've darkened that down a little bit so that it's not, so that you're, because when it's like, not this, so when it's like that, all your attention is kind of getting drawn to it because it's the brightest part of the picture. So I toned that down a little bit, giving it the orange glow that it wanted. Now the next thing was, we didn't want to have this carpet, that's not really telling us much, so I put a bit of beach in. And I took this from another photo that I've got, and basically just cut out the beach and then sort of set about masking it very carefully in, so that we've got the beach that we want. And then the shadows that Russ was talking about, they got painted in afterwards as well. So I sort of created them, put them in. So that gave us our beach. Next up was I wanted background. So I took a picture which had stars and managed to overlay that into the background. And then I took a photo of a picture I had of a moon, put that up into the sky, and then it was a sort of slight yellow tint, but I wanted it slightly more blue, so I kind of just changed the colour of that a little bit. So now we're up to this stage. Next thing, I start coming in, I start bringing in the shadows a bit more, and sort of really kind of starting to polish it somewhat. And then the next thing was I've got here is I wanted to kind of intensify the colours a little bit, so the blues become a little bit bluer, creating a cool effect which is contrasting a little bit more with the yellows, and giving us more that sense of a kind of moonlight, and then just brightening it up a little bit as well. Then I kind of went around dodge and burn, where I'm brightening up highlights, darkening down shadows, and just really making it kind of zing a little bit more. Channel mixer, that's just essentially intensifying the blues and the yellows a little bit. Then the other thing was now we've got this big gap on here, I thought we really need something on the sail. And so I made a mermaid like this. And essentially I took the shape of one of the mermaid pictures, and using triangles just sort of created a kind of triangle version of mermaid, and just then overlaid that onto the sail. So we ended up with like a little mermaid bit just in there, which was fun. And then finally brightening it up a little bit more, so that so in the end we've gone from that to this. And that's really the editing process for that. Quick check at the comments, and then I'll take you through. I want to show you what I did with the mermaid as well. Oh, so where are we? Oh, Meg's saying in Dumfries it was a very warm day. What day was that then, Meg? Because we weren't in Dumfries today. Rosemary says, thank you for going through the step-by-step process and explaining your thinking at each stage. Helpful and inspiring. Excellent. I'm glad you found that useful. Brian says, brilliant end result. Garry says, how long did that all take, Kim? Way too long is the answer to that. Do you know, I didn't keep a timesheet. I really have no idea how many hours went in, but quite a lot of hours went into it. Visiting it, revisiting it. There were certain things like the sail I found particularly difficult. Things like creating the separate mermaid to go in. VG says the sand and shadows is perfect. Getting that much perfection, a small mistake, and you have to redo from the beginning. Loving the photo. Well, the sand was another one. I did a lot of going back. Trying to get the sand convincing was particularly difficult. What I'm showing you here is the end stage. And each of those stages that I did, quite a lot of work went into. Rosie says, when you did the sky overlay, did you mask out the models and effectively rub them out? Kind of. I mean, to show you then, if we go back here, it wasn't really... It's more a case of, you can see the dark areas. And so I sort of selected the dark areas, put the stars in, and then used the selection of the dark areas to just sort of paint in the mask. So it was sort of doing it in verse, rather than putting the whole thing in and then painting everybody out. Essentially, I just automatically just masked over where the people were. Does that make sense, Rosie? Hope it does. Okay, next thing I want to do then, I want to show you what I did with Zoe. How we went from this picture to this picture. And if you're going to ask Garry how long, this one took days. Days is the answer to that. It's one of those things where your enthusiasm for an idea far outweighs your ability to actually pull it off easily, and then you realise you've committed to it, and one way or another you've got to make it work, and you charge off down one route and it doesn't work, and you go off down another route and it doesn't work, and you watch YouTube video after YouTube video after YouTube video, and none of the YouTube videos that I'm watching are doing quite what I want, and I'm trying to learn bits from one and swap it over to another. Anyway, let me take you through the Zoe layers, and you'll get a better sense then of what was involved in that. So I'll just close this one. So here we have Zoe shot against the green screen. Now, as you can see, I've got the light on. This is the behind the scenes photo with just the natural daylight. And then you can see now we've got the light just coming basically from one side. Now, what I needed then was I needed water, I'll do the water first. And basically, this is just a gradient map with a circle. I found the photos that I liked the shades of, took the lightest part, the darkest part, created a circular gradient map to create this. Then I overlaid a beach. So this is actually the same beach shot that I used under the set of the last one. If I make that larger and white there, you can see the section that I've taken and I've cropped it, except that what I've then done is I blended it in softly so it looks like the beach is just sort of disappearing into the background. Then I sort of darkened down this patch on the left because that was kind of taking up too much sight. Now, I've also got a shadow here. That I put in afterwards, but I had to sort of take the layers down because this shadow appeared because I needed a shadow underneath the mermaid in order to separate her out from the thing. So although I'm just working my way up through the layers, this layer was in fact done a bit later. So now we have, essentially, we take Zoe and I've sort of cut her out of the green screen, and I've tried doing bits and pieces which haven't really worked so well. I've tried then recolouring that to make it easier to blend in. I tilted her, taken those ones back out. the problem is here as well is that we have a green shift, because of course it was on a green screen, so everything's been shifted. Now I tried taking the green slider and shifting it into blue, and it just didn't really work too well. I kind of got limited results. I managed to essentially desaturate some of the green, and that gave me that kind of feel. So that's my sort of Zoe cutout level 1. Next thing I needed to do was I played around with blurring her, or selectively blurring parts of her. Actually, coming back to that, and it was really about trying to get the edges so that she didn't look totally stuck on. In the way here is obviously she's being cut out, so you've kind of got to do things where you're just softly playing around with the edges to give a sense of it's not totally just cut out and stuck in, but she could actually be in that space. So the next thing then is it's still looking kind of stuck on. So I've got this, you see and I had to go off and learn how to do this, and I can't remember exactly how I did, but basically creating these light beams, these light streams that come down. And then what I did, that gradient map that I showed you earlier, I then took it again and laid it over half with and used it as a colour. So that's sort of normal. So I took that and then took it down to, was it 47% or whatever, and then did it as a colour overlay. And then that allowed us to turn it from being a very bright, vivid to now looking like she was underwater. Still playing around, and then I came across this lovely little video which talked about doing an underwater thing, and essentially they talked about using snow or little particles which you add in, and I'm just going to show you now. You're not really going to see this, but if I zoom in here, do you see? So we've got the little beam coming down, but when you start putting this in, and it's like the plankton, like there's sort of little particles that float about, and once I've sort of put that in, combined with the, it now all started to sort of feel like, oh, this is now really starting to look much more convincing. We've got these light beams coming through the water, we've got these little particles going through, we've got the blurriness as we want, we've got this shadow down underneath. Then I kind of darken down the edges a bit more, so it's a little bit more like she's in a light beam, and then boosting the levels as well. Then the next thing to do was to try and create some bubbles, which was also another nightmare. I had no idea how to do this. I had to go off, watch lots of YouTube videos, learn how to do it, and then figure out how to place them more or less convincingly. So we've got some down here by the tail. I then added some up. I thought the majority of them were likely to be above the mouth. And so that gives us our bubbles. And then, so that's then our final image. So what we've done is we've started with that, and then we've constructed everything else to end with that. A lot of work, days and days went into creating this. But once I'd mastered this one, I was then able to do the other ones, the other mermaids, much more quickly, because I'd now got the process. It was still a lot of work to cut each of the mermaids out, though none of them were as bad as when you're trying to cut out a wheelchair. Or more particularly, the spokes on a wheelchair. These were where it really got absolutely nightmarish. But that's what we did. That was the fun with that. And just to show you, what was rather wonderful is the current Dumfries and Galloway Life featured it. So here we go, nice little kind of spread here where we've got the main picture. We've got Sky is down here, one of the mermaids in the corner. We've got the behind the scenes crew picture, book launch picture, and what was also rather nice was the contents page. They decided to use that photo of Zoe as well. This one in particular, I just think Zoe looks absolutely fantastic in this. So part of it is just the joyousness on her face, beautiful expression. She was just so utterly into it. And also, of course, you don't expect a mermaid to be in a wheelchair underwater. So that's so huge amounts of conceptual fun massive headaches, but also an amazing learning experience with Photoshop. I had to learn so many things in order to be able to create that. And fantastic crew, fantastic people. Everybody who took part was really into it. All the people who helped out. And it was just a brilliant project from start to finish. And I feel really proud to have been involved with it. So that then is the whole thing with the Kippford Mermaid. So let's just take a little bit. You can see some more comments come in. Oh, Maggie says just a bit of magic, really. VG loves the mermaid on the sail as a good finishing touch. And she also noticed the bubbles. Rosemary says, yes, Maggie, magic indeed. Meg says, we're in the Dumfries on the 23rd of July and it was very warm. That's true, Meg. That's true. At the moment, though, it's cold and wet, according to Brian and Jim. Jackie says the images were very time consuming. Yes, they were. Russ says the whole I can do that, which fast becomes how the hell do I do that, sounds familiar to all. Yeah, I think, anybody who doesn't do photography thinks, I could do that, and then suddenly struggles with it. And then you can do photography and you still do exactly the same thing. You whether it's Photoshop or anything else, you think, yeah, hey, I can do this. And you dive into it and then realise you're just way over your head. But then you learn, and that's the brilliant part about it. VG says she is floating. It looks very dreamy. Russ says, I think the single mermaid shot is an absolute triumph. Well, thank you. Rosemary, yeah, okay, several people saying bravo, amazing, well done, smug points. Yeah, okay, I'm enjoying this. I can take the praise, I have a rather cavernous ego. All the praise you can give me, there's always room for more. Vijay said it would have been a great moment to see your work in print. It always is, and it looks so totally different when you see it in print, because I'm so used to seeing it on the screen that when it's in print you go, oh, that looks good, oh, I did that, there's a different kind of disconnect, which is always a bit strange. Gary's enjoying the work. Stacey says great achievement to be published. Rosie says, why Kippford? The story, I don't know whether you just came in a little bit late. It's the Kippford Mermaid. Basically, it's based on an old tale about an old tale from Kippford. Apparently, to be honest, I don't fully know the background of it, but it was a story that they'd gathered and they decided that they wanted to do it based on the Kippford Mermaid. Jim says, every day is a school day, thank goodness for YouTube. Absolutely, YouTube is my online university. And Russ says, give yourself a whole heap of smug points. Absolutely. Right. Cool. Well, all right. Artsend says, Artsenders says, hi, Rosie. The story is based on a local oral folk tale called The Mermaid of Barnhuri, which is close to the town of Kippford. Okay, we broke the story down to make it more accessible. We loved every minute. Thank you very much for explaining that. That's really interesting. Yes. Rosemary's got to run. I remember she said she was only going to be here for the first part. Glad you could make it along, and I know you'll be watching the catch up for the rest. Well, thank you so much, Artsend, for turning up and being supportive and giving us the extra information. It was a fantastic shoot. Greatly enjoyed it, hopefully then that all gives you a little bit of an insight and maybe a little bit of inspiration to be adventurous. This is the thing with the photography, is if we tried to stage something like that and we were charging proper money and doing stuff for a photo shoot for a big magazine, it would be muchly thousands of pounds with, you're paying huge numbers of professionals to turn up and do that. And yet we managed to achieve something with pretty much mostly goodwill and enthusiasm and imagination. And the big thing with these things is getting everybody on board and having a team working with you. I mean, the number of little bits that, while I was concentrating on the main photography, other people were helping create the set. Other people were doing the hair and makeup. Heather's mother, with the mermaid outfits, I think all the tails turned out to be much smaller than they were expecting. And so she cut down the seams, sewed in extra material, and then sewed it all back up absolutely seamlessly, absolutely brilliant. They just look perfect. As a photographer, chances are you don't have all the other skills, so that teaming up with other people, so that you collaborate together, that's what allows you to create something that none of you could do individually. And that's what I really love doing, and I would really greatly encourage anybody to do this. Create a photo shoot where you get in contact with a local hairdresser or makeup artist or a theatre group or a local band. We've talked about this before. They're always up for interesting photos. And stretch your Photoshop skills and create something which looks like a movie poster or a film still or something, a snap from a theatre production or something like that. Lots of fun to be had. Right, okay, so where are we? Rosie says, many thanks, I understand now. For those who don't know, Kippford is a beautiful little town along the coast from here. Yeah, it's about 10 miles roughly from Castle Douglas where I stay. Cool, okay. Meg says it was amazing to be there to do the Kippford Mermaid shoot with my dad. Yes, Meg came along because she knew half the people there, came along, was an assistant, so yeah. There's a point. Yes, Fiji says it's a bit frightening, been postponing one dance for a month here now. A dance shoot. Yes, I mean that is something else. This photo shoot took place a couple of months ago. We'd had to get to a bit whereby pretty much everybody there, the whole team, I think, had been double vaccinated. Everybody was doing flow tests before they turned up. Lots of time and effort went into that as well, which is now a part of our everyday life. And certainly the fact that we were in a very, very large building space helped as well. So yeah, all these kind of things have to be taken into consideration, but well worth doing. Right, so what we're going to do now is, just to sort of say now, just a wee reminder, if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, helpful, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is certainly a way you can tip the photographer or help out and support the podcasts. Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the critique section. And the critique section is the place where you can send in your own images where, perhaps you've got a little bit stuck, you've got a photo so far, you're not sure what else you could be doing with it, you're wanting some genuine feedback. This is the place to do it. It's always difficult. We put our pictures up on Facebook and everybody says, that's lovely, but they don't necessarily know photography, they don't know what's wrong with it, or maybe they're just being nice and polite and lovely to you. How do you get genuine feedback on your photos? That's always a tricky thing. So the critique section then is here for you to send me your images. If you're on Facebook, then there is a Facebook group called Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Just type that into Facebook, you will find it easily enough. Join the group. There you can post images. It doesn't necessarily just have to be for me to critique either. If you put the image in and ask, other people can give feedback as well. But also if you want to ask questions, whether it's about composition or it's about lighting or it's about editing or camera settings, anything photography, I'm here to help. That's what the whole point of these podcasts is to help improve your understanding of photography. So what we're going to do then is VG's put, I'm talking about being there to shoot photos, something like stage fright. COVID I can live with. Well, stage fright, I suppose that bit kind of comes out of imposter syndrome, which pretty much everybody suffers from on one level. Most people do. Certainly creatives suffer from it a huge amount. The feeling that people are going to realise you're making it up as you go along and that you're bluffing most of the time. The reality is nearly everybody is making it up as they go along and they're bluffing. It's one of those things, in conversation recently about when you're a child, you think grown-ups know what they're doing. And I can hear the guffaws and chuckles coming back through the internet at me. No, grown-ups don't know what they're doing. Everybody's making it up as they go along. Now, you maybe gain a bit more experience, but we all kind of fear that we're not going to be able to do it. But you learn to do it by doing it. You get better at doing things by doing them. I think as long as you're not profoundly lying to people, I think if you go in and say, look, I've got a great idea, let's try this out, then, you know, and you're collaborating with people, then they're on your side. Slightly different if they're paying you, then you have to come up with the goods regardless of whether you feel you're capable of it or not. You just have to keep going at it until you do have what you want. But yeah, stage fright every single time I go to a photo shoot. The morning, as I'm sticking my shoes on, about to head out the door, I feel sick with anticipation that the whole thing is going to go horribly wrong. And every single time my wife has to remind me that I always feel that way, and once I'm there, I'm fine. Right, okay, so yes, back to then the critique section. So what we're going to do then is we're going to move on to the critique section, work our way through the photos that we have. Oh, actually, just before I get to that, one more thing. Ben, do anybody remember last week when we were doing the shadows challenge? And Ben was playing around with coloured lights. And his picture, he used a red light, a blue light and a green light, bicycle lights, shone them onto a vase, and then, created... maybe it's just easier if I show you. If I do that, and I do that, and I do that, and then do that. So if you remember, yeah, so last week Ben created this using different coloured shadows, and was then talking about the fact that even though he'd used red, green and blue lights, you ended up with cyan, yellow, magenta shadows, and then where they were overlapping you ended up with blue and green and red, and then finally black where they were all overlapping. So I attempted to try and explain the notion of this, how you can end up with coloured shadows and how the different coloured shadows create more colours. Ben has actually written a blog post on this. So what I'm going to do is, at the end of this, I will paste that into the... In fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. For anybody who's really interested, I'll just paste that into the comments here right now. You can click on it for another window and go and check it after the podcast. But I'll put it into the Facebook group as well. So if you want to go and read it, he's broken it down into much more detail with photos of various bits. So if that notion of coloured lights and coloured shadows interests you and you'd like to know a bit more about what was going on, he's created this fantastic blog post about it. So do go check it out. Right, okay, so now we are finally going to get round to the critique section. So we're going to start off then with Jim. And Jim started off with this photo and says, "Hi Kim, this image is for critique. It was taken at the Jupiter Artland in Edinburgh. Terrific place to visit if you ever get the chance. However, I'm not sure I caught this properly with the bridge in the back. The sky looks a bit dull, the apple on the stand seems a bit in shade. I tried to expose for the stand, but it hasn't turned out as I hoped. Any critique welcome." Okay, Jim. So, first of all, the first thing to say is if you are exposing for the stand and the apple, then because that's darker, the camera is going to brighten everything. It's got to be lighter in order to get to the stand not being completely in silhouette. Of course, it doesn't just selectively lighten one area, it lightens everything. So the sky then ends up being much brighter than you necessarily wanted it as well. And it's always this problem that when you're exposing for one part of the photo, you have to understand it's actually going to have an effect across every part of the photo. So first of all though, let's just take this into Photoshop. And I'll close Zoe there. Now, one of the things I have to say first is we need to straighten it a little bit. While you can't tell the horizon, the reality is this just looks like it's tilting off to the side slightly, and I'm sure by now, Jim, you must have realised that I can never quite cope with that, and so we just need to rotate this pretty much just about 1 degree, 1.1, yeah, 1.1 degree. That's all it needed, counterclockwise, and immediately I feel I can breathe a little bit easier. The other thing I would say though is I think with a composition like this, if you're going to sort of have it off centre, I think that it looks like there's quite a lot of space underneath. If this is really about the stand and the apple on it, why not go full rule of thirds and just actually have this bit here sitting right there? And I think that composition immediately feels slightly better. Now, in the case of this, I think what I will do is I will drag this into Camera Raw. I know you don't use Raw, Photoshop, you use Affinity. I don't know the settings on that. I don't have a copy of it. But to give you a sense of what you can do, and there's bound to be similar things. If I go to the basic here, and if I pull up just the shadows, if I pull up the whole exposure, so then we lose everything. But I can take the shadows and just boost the shadows, and if I boost the shadows, we notice we suddenly now have much more detail coming out of here. So you can boost that as much as you want it. The sky's still too bright. We take the highlights, we pull down the highlights, and we now got a little bit more detail in the sky. And I'm sure if you've got the original raw file, there'll be more detail available to it than the little thing that turns up on Facebook. And then if you want, throw in a little bit of a vignette as well, just kind of bring a little bit more attention back into the middle of the photo. And so we've gone from that to that, and I immediately think that's kind of brightened it a bit. The other thing I would say with this, Jim, is this red bridge is red, and it kind of does grab the attention somewhat. Now, that's fine if it's kind of about the bridge. If we remember, but if you go back to when we were doing the red challenge a few weeks back, there is that notion of red, almost like selective colour. It's one of those colours that just grabs the attention and it pulls your eye immediately to it. And if I look at this photo, there's just as much chance of me seeing the bridge before I even see the apple. So perhaps you might want to tone down the red slightly if you're not wanting the bridge to be the main focus of the photo. So in that case, if you go to the hue saturation levels and then select the red and then take the saturation slider and just nudge it down. Now I can take it all the way down and that's now become a kind of grey, or I can just nudge it back up. So it's sort of into the sort of faded pinks a little bit. There's still a bit of red there, but not as overpowering as it was. So something like that then, Jim, might kind of give you a little bit more of the kind of photo that you were looking for. So first of all then, in summary, be careful when you're exposing that if you are exposing for a darker area, other bits like skies especially can end up getting blown out. Likewise, if you expose for skies, which are going to be bright, the darker bits are going to end up in shadow. Experience should teach you to a certain extent. You need to learn with your camera. Take photos at different exposures. Take one where you expose for the sky, take one where you expose for the midground, take one where you expose for the shadows. Now, if you've got a tripod, you can usually quite often blend these in Photoshop or your editing program anyway. But over and above that, what you might find is that under certain conditions, it might be easier to recover details that are lost in shadow than it is to recover details that are lost in highlight, or vice versa, depending on the settings you had on your camera at the time you took them. So if in doubt, do a couple of different versions with different exposures and then play around on the computer when you get back. And then be careful of anything that's red in a photo, because it will grab the attention. If you want it to grab the attention, that's fine. But if the red is taking the attention away from the key thing that you were wanting to photograph, and what you tell me here is that it was this stand with the apple that was your kind of key bit, then you need to make sure that anything red is toned down a little bit so that it isn't grabbing all the attention. So, hope that makes sense. Hope that helps, Jim. Right. Okay. So, next thing then, we will go on to Robert. Now, Robert said, you might remember a few weeks ago, Robert put in a picture of Zakir. Jim's just actually, I'll just commented, I'll just say, thanks Kim, Affinity has similar functions which I will try, like your crop and edit. Okay, cool. And VG says, the bridge itself is a great subject. Changing the colour of the bridge, the apple stands out more. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so yeah, now Robert was photographing Zakir, and I went through, gave him some tips about doing colour shifts and where the attention was being taken. Anyway, he's back there, he's taken more photos. So I had a second round of pictures of Zakir where he's standing in front of the chair. I pointed the flash up at the ceiling, so which then created a reflection in the mirror. So here's Robert's unedited version, here's his original version, and then here's his edited version, which is definitely, And what he's done here, I can see, is what I was talking about before, where he's created more of a blue shift onto Zakir himself, but allowing the yellows to remain in the background. So you get that warmth, you get that contrast going on. He's also managed to brighten him up so that we can see him a bit more clearly against the background. Robert goes on to say, I copied the layer, burnt out the flash, so he's got rid of the bright patch on the ceiling here, as well as toned down the lights in the background. I was able to isolate Zach and bring out more details and colours. I'm not 100% happy with this, but definitely in the 90% range. Would love to hear how you would have done the edits differently. Well, I think by and large you're definitely on the right track, and you've done an awful lot of things that I would have done myself, Robert. But there are a couple of things where I do feel we're sort of slightly missing it. One is you've done quite a sort of strong contrast, and the blacks have sort of become quite dark, and I think we're kind of losing his hair into the background a bit, and also we're losing his trousers into the chair in the background as well. So what I'll do is we'll go back into Photoshop, and I'll just try and take you through what I might have done slightly differently. Not faster. So the first thing you've done is there's a big chunk over here which isn't really necessary, so you crop that in there, brought this side in a little bit and brought that down to something like that. And that's fair enough, that's a good enough crop. Just he's slightly off center, but we've also got these reflected lights here just the other side of the off center, so there's a kind of a nice balance there. We've also got the warmth of the lights in the background. So I'll just duplicate this layer, and the first thing we'll do is we'll do that blue shift that you've done. So in Camera Raw, because everything's kind of got this yellow, slightly sort of yellow golden feel to it, I think what we do is up here we shift the temperature away from the yellow into the blue. We just sort of drop that over there a little bit. Now that's taken the warmth out of the lights. So what I will do here is I will mask everything back in, and then just paint, undo that. So we've got the blue here on Zakir. So that's giving us sort of the first stage here. So we've got the blue here, but we still managed to keep the yellow in the background. So I'll copy those onto another layer. Let's take this back into Camera Raw. And I think the other thing you did here was you added a vignette. So we'll just do that as well. So that helps sort of bring in the edges. So yeah, it just sort of subtly brings it in, bring more of our attention back to the beginning. Let's duplicate that layer. Now, the next thing here is though that I tend to feel that we've got a lot of attention on the shirt, but his face is a little bit dark. So what I kind of want to do here, I think, is I'm just going to do something I'm going to brighten this to create more light on here, but then I'm going to take the highlights down a little bit. Actually, I'll tell you what, we'll do this step by step. Let's just do the brightened face first. Now again, I will create a fill mask and just then paint in so we've got a brighter face, so we know what's going on there. Then the next stage is then to take down the highlights of the shirt. So if I take the highlights down here, that darkens his shirt about. But the other thing is what we're losing somewhat in the trousers and his hair, and this is where maybe I would want to bring the shadows up. So I'll bring the shadows up like that, so I can bring them up quite a way. And then at this point we can shove in a little bit of extra texture or a little bit of clarity if you want. And again, what we can do is mask out most of that and then just gently paint back in on Zakir. And you really notice then, the trousers starting to stand out a little bit more. So at this point, this is kind of where I get to, I think. We're allowing these, the trousers, the chair, that's sort of standing out a little bit more. We've got we can see his face more. We've still got the that sort of bluish shift against the warmth of the background. And it's really, I mean, you've done most of this. I think it's just really about bringing a little bit more out of the shadow, not making the shadow so hard. Because if we look at your version here, I just tend to feel that the shadows have become, the blacks have become too black as such. And we're kind of losing something in that. And so it's just really bringing it a stage back from being a little bit overcooked, I think. And then I think this looks much more naturalistic. It's not obvious that it's been sort of edited too much. Obviously, it's a very quick edit, and you would spend a little bit more time tidying it up. But essentially, it's that then, Robert. I think you took a lot of the ideas we talked about before, you implemented them, and you did a really good job of it. I think the only problem was really kind of just taking some of the sliders a little bit too far. Maybe you need to draw a little bit more detail out of the shadows, and maybe not slide the clarity slider across, or the texture slider across so far that it starts to look a little bit overcooked. But other than that, I think you're definitely onto something, and I hope that helps. Right. Okay, and VG thought you did a great edit, Robert, with such a warm smile. And Pat says, lovely relaxed photo too. Cool. Okay, where are we at then? Next up, we're going to do Roy. And where are we? So this is Roy's photo. Now, Roy says, I saw a poster reflected in the water and thought, fish out of water. Could I have done better? And basically, if we zoom in, you can see there's a poster here of the extraordinary revelations of Orca the goldfish. And down here is a reflection of it in the water. So you've got the fish reflected in the water, and therefore his fish out of water. So I have to say, Roy, nicely spotted, fun idea. I think concept-wise, really good. Find yourself a smug point. In terms of the execution, well, that's a tricky one, because the problem is I don't really know what you could have done to get it better. And the problem is the photo as it is doesn't really work without the explanations. Part of it is, I mean, it's a very kind of long, thin photo. I'm assuming that you're probably taking it on your phone. And if you're looking at this on a small screen, even if, as I'm looking at this on my computer monitor, I can't quite read the writing, or I've got to kind of zoom in a little bit before I can read the writing. I can kind of see the fish. I can see a reflection, but my eye isn't really getting drawn down here much, because I'm trying to work out what that says. So the problem is that it's not really carrying through. And I think, in essence, the solution to this is something that you couldn't have done in the first place. So, I mean, well, for example, one of the things you could do is first of all, if you lightened up the bottom, because this bottom part is much darker, if I take the curves, brighten it up, but then we'll just mask out the top part. So essentially what we've done is we've just lightened the bottom part. That immediately allows us to draw a little bit more attention to the fact something's going on down here. But the big problem is that these are miles apart. And we've talked before about the fact that in photography gaps get exaggerated, and in this case that gap is hugely exaggerated. But there isn't really a way of narrowing that gap convincingly. What we really needed with this was to have this poster. If this poster had been hanging on the railings, and then the reflection had just been under the railings, it would have made much more sense. I mean, if let's just copy that, paste, wrong one, copy that and paste that there and drag that down. So if that was sort of at that level, and then similarly, if copy, paste that, not there, sorry, copy and paste that there. Oh, where have I gone? Doing wrong things here. Let me move back a little bit. Right, so I've got that on here. Let's remove that for a moment. Copy that, paste that, drag it up to there, drag this one sort of down to here, and then kind of crop in like that. And then at this point, you need to mask out a little bit. Something there, and then similarly mask a little bit of that back in here. Now, if you're kind of at that level, you're sort of now moving more into the realms, and we brighten that up again, whereby you go, now I can see something's going on here. We've got the fish here and we've got the reflection. But the thing is about this, Roy, is that it needs to be this close before it really makes sense. And if we go back to your original photo, it doesn't. So it's one of those things where, in essence, I think the problem is it's a fun idea, and I think you could post it on social media with the little story. Oh, I saw this post of the fish. I saw the reflection in the water, and I thought, fish out of water. And now you've said that, everybody can look at it and go, yeah, excellent. I see what you mean. Nice little joke, visual joke, and it's worked. But the reality of but I wouldn't try sort of putting this into one of the online competitions. I don't think it would be noticeable, and especially if you figure that most people who are looking at these things are on tablets or phones. The image is too small to really make out the detail of it on something which is only ever going to be about this big. So, hope that makes sense, and I've given you a sense of understanding. Not just saying, no, it doesn't work, but why it doesn't work, what it would be needed to make it work, and, of course, the understanding why that isn't practical. So, hope that helps a bit. Right, where are we? Boom, 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 boom. Okay. Right. Roy says, okay, I'll go and move the poster. Yes. Go and hang it on the railings. Okay, what else have we got? Vigi said the poster after moved closely looks better. Yeah, okay, and also she likes the idea. Okay, Owen Robert says thanks all. Cool. Right. So, next then, we want to go to Garry. Now, Garry, in a way, not a dissimilar kind of thing to Jim. It's about notion of exposure. So this was Garry's photo, and what he said was, "Hi Kim, I took the attached image in Cambridge, but it's too dark." Or well, this is the one he's edited up. Now he sent me the raw file, so no, I forgot about that. I need to open that in Photoshop, which it will in a moment. So what he says is, so you can see now that the original is much, much darker. You can't really make out much of the road at all. He says, it's too dark, and the best I can achieve the best he could achieve in Lightroom, let's close a few of these so I can show you. So this is what he created in Lightroom. I wondered if Photoshop might do better. I have little expertise with that software, but you clearly have. What guidance would you provide to improve on this shot? The thing is, actually, Garry, I think it's a nice photo. You've got the road leading up, you've got the sun at the end there, and you're kind of expecting most of it you want the tree to be in silhouette. You want that lovely little bit of light reflecting on the road. So if you kind of feel like you've pushed it to the limit, certainly Photoshop, I think you can brighten it more. The question is how much you want to brighten it more. So if we go back to here, if I just click the auto settings here, we end up with almost identical with what you already had. The key things being here, take that auto off, that what we've done is we've taken the shadows and brought them up, maybe push the exposure a little bit more, and then taken the highlights down a little bit more. Maybe you can brighten that a little bit more, something like that. Take the highlights down a bit more, so we've still got the sun. And really what we're doing here is we're trying to play with that notion of, we want the sort of darkness of the sky, but maybe sort of a little bit more brighter in the foreground. But it's how much you want to do it. You can selectively mask off again. I mean, again, if I take a curves layer, we can brighten this up so that the road is as bright as, you know, what we would expect in a normal day, but then we mask out the sky to get that beautiful dark sun again. So you can kind of semi-edit, and then maybe if I do a sort of 30% and just sort of touching around the corners into this field, sort of pull that down a little bit, something like that. So you can kind of play with how much you want to edit it and where you want to edit it and where you want to sort of selectively brighten or darken. And it's really kind of that. The other thing I would say is, that horizon just isn't quite straight. Sorry, Gary, I just want to nudge that a little bit. There we go, just about 1 degree clockwise, something like that. And yeah, now I can breathe a little bit more easily. So really, Gary, the thing here is about what else you want to do. How much brighter do you actually want it to be? And you can boost it with things like curves and levels, but then selectively mask the areas that you wanted to apply to or not apply to. Chances are Lightroom, now the thing is, I don't use Lightroom, I don't really know what's available to it, but I'm sure there are sort of places where you can kind of selectively decide to boost one part but not another part of the picture. If you can't, then certainly drop it into Photoshop, which allows you that to do. So I hope that gives you a sort of sense of how you would approach this, whether you're wanting to brighten the whole thing or just selectively lighten up patches of it. So hopefully that gives you the answer, or an answer. Anyway, right, okay. John says that slight twist in the end of the road really adds to the shot, I think, and I think it really does. It's a lovely shot, that. Russ says, I think you've done a good job, Gary, much brighter and you'd lose the atmosphere. And I think he's right. If you are lightening it, you're just trying to selectively lighten it and decide where you need it. So, right, Gary says thank you. Cool. Okay, next up then we're going to talk about Michele. And Michele has sent in this picture of Rose and says, where are we? I put this photo in for critique as I don't know what to do to improve it. I love the rose and the water droplets, but not sure about the background. Any ideas welcome. Okay. I think with this one, Michele, well, first of all, it has to be said, bright red rose, raindrops on it, beautiful. Certainly, if the minute the rain stops, if you've got flowers like this in your garden, leap out with the camera because you're in for a treat. And it's a lovely photo, and you've managed to capture all that wonderful kind of jewel-like aspects of the raindrops on the petals. Now, the next bit, the bit that you're talking about, which is you're pleased with the rose, but you don't feel the background's doing much. What else could you have done? At this point, really what you're talking about is either you needed to take it from a different angle, or you then need to cut it out. If you're not happy with the background, then you need to change the background. And sometimes you can do that. It's, like a lot of these things, you can kind of draw around the edges, use your selection tool, and then stick in your background of choice. Obviously, your background still needs to feel that it is complementary to and natural to the background, to the foreground. What background you then choose is kind of up to you, but you have to make sure you balance the light levels right. So it's not like you put a bright sunny blue sky behind it, because the lighting on the petals doesn't have that bright blue kind of sunny feel to it. The shadowing is that it's on a dull overcast day. Now, really, I think if you're trying to take it in camera though, it's one of these things. I often say to people with photography, when you start out in photography, and I know you've been doing photography a lot, you're not starting out, but this is true for anybody who is starting out in photography. One of the things that happens is we start off, we get really absorbed with the thing we are photographing, as we should be. There's the rose, we're photographing the rose, all our attention is going on the rose. It's to the point whereby we don't notice what's in the background. How often have you taken photos of people and you thought, you're so concentrated on the person that you then missed completely this awful thing happening in the background which just completely ruins the shot. It happens all the time, and by and large, through experience, the more this happens to you, the more eventually you start, when you're taking a photo, part of your brain goes, oh, and what's happening behind it? And in this case, I think you have to really just go and say, I love this rose, am I happy with the background? If I'm not happy with the background now, what can I do to change it now? Can I change the angle so I have something else in the background? Can I stick something else in the background? Or perhaps with something like this, maybe your angle is just sort of slight edge here. Now, by the look of it, it's sharpest just on the sort of front edge of these petals. By the time we get to the center, it's starting to lose the sharpness. With a rose, you kind of tend to want the middle part of it. I think it's like the equivalent to the eye in a human. With a flower like this, you really want the center, but that's the bit that should be sharpest. And then what I would say is what you would really do is just change your angle up and move in and shoot down into the center of the rose, and get all those beautiful droplets, and the concentric circles coming, spirals coming out of it. If you don't like, in essence, what we're talking about is if you don't like the background and you can't change the background, zoom in close enough so that the background no longer matters. The background isn't noticeable. Now, with this particular one, because of the angle of it, we can't zoom in without that background still being a part of it. So I think this is as much really, the answer to this is a conceptual thing about when you're taking the photo. It's about noticing the background and then, like I say, changing the angle so either the background is different, changing the background consciously, sticking a blue poster up, hanging a towel there, or whatever else you want to do, or literally changing your angle and zooming in, getting closer and closer to the point whereby the background is no longer a part of it. So I don't really know what I would do with this photo itself, other than, if you really wanted to, you could cut it out and try and find another one. It's a lot of work to do, which wouldn't necessarily improve on the photo. I think it's much more a thing about at the point you're taking the photo, that's really what you kind of need to consider. So I hope that helps a bit, Michele. Right. Stacey says, lovely roses. I think showing more roses and crop the background. Well, yes, that's true. If there'd been other roses in the background echoing, I don't know. It's another bit. It's about changing the background as you're taking it. And Meg says, I really like the colour red because the rose has a really nice smell. And roses, yeah, some roses do have gorgeous smell. This is true. And the red ones really catch your eye. VG reckons losing some of the water droplets and getting in closer would be more beautiful as well. So there's another option for you. Okay, so finally then, we're going to finish with Russ. Now, this I've kept this one to last because I kind of want to chat a little bit because there's a conceptual level on here as well, which I feel is quite interesting. Because we're kind of getting slightly philosophical with the photography, and basically what Russ says is, I decided to put in for critique this photo in for critique this week, as I've been commissioned twice in recent weeks to take some baby portraits. As some of you know, this is far removed from my usual work of capturing lunatics careering around on the countryside on motorbikes. So I greatly appreciate some constructive criticism from all of you, and suggestions for improvements for your wealth and experience in portrait photography, Kim. So he goes on to say, meet Louis. This shot was taken lit by a single flash in a soft box with a grid to the left. And there was also a flash behind the white backdrop. It's a very simple set, which is what the parents wanted, but I'm more interested in the quality of the finish. I haven't done a great deal in the editing. Slight increase in the contrast for warmth and slight decrease in clarity for a softer feel, although he then masked the eyes on that softness so that the eyes themselves may stay sharp. Okay, so what we're talking now, by and large, when you're doing baby photos, you're kind of onto a winner straight away. You created a simple setup, a non-distracting background, and then you have a baby, and the baby is smiling. You've got the instant ah factor. Any parent's going to look at that baby and go, I love it. So you know what you're doing with that light, you know what you're doing with the camera, you've got the soft focus, you've got the baby smiling, you've got the uncluttered background. You've done everything you need to get you to that point. And that will be good enough for any parent who's asked you to do that. They will look at a photo like this and go, yes, I'm happy with that. Here's your paycheck. Touching this up a little bit more, editing this, toning down that, highlighting that, I don't think there's really anything I'm going to be able to tell you that you don't know already, or probably haven't really done, Russ. So what I want you to consider then is the next bit of this. Because what else can you do with baby photos? Now, essentially baby photos tend to come in a couple of flavours and varieties. The white sheet or white bedspread, or sometimes coloured bedspread depending, is certainly one of them. And I've seen these kind of things done on canvas prints sitting on people's walls. The other one is where you get busy with props. And there's a little willow basket and a crocheted blanket and a funny little headband and baby all tightly cute or dressed up as something. And these are kind of cute and fun. But the thing is, whether it's dressing the baby up in costume or it's doing the white background, to my mind, and I'm open to debate, and I know there will be people who will disagree with me in this, but to my mind, the essential problem with it is its product photography of babies. It's not really baby portraiture, it's product. It's the baby, you know. If I decided I was going to photograph this torch because I wanted to sell the torch and wanted to be nothing complicated about this torch, I would photograph it in a not 100% dissimilar way. Maybe, okay, I would use a white, a piece of white card or something rather than a bedspread. But it would be nicely lit. You've got very soft lighting, beautifully soft lighting, so the baby's well lit. A little bit of slight shadow on the right, which adds to that softness of the skin. Beautifully done. But it's product photography. Now, the thing is because people see this all the time, they've come to expect it. And so that's what they ask for. And they're happy with it because that's all they were expecting. I want you to think for a moment about, okay, if we move away from the idea of babies as product to babies, what is the real key? What is the real narrative about babies? And that is connection. A baby is a creation of the parents, is an extension of the parents. It's the bond, it's the flesh, it's the genetic, it's connection. It's absolutely connection. And really, my feeling is, if you are going to create a baby photo which is going to have maximum impact, you have to have the baby with the parent. You have to have one of them holding it. You have to have them close. You want the nose to nose. You want the cheek to cheek. Or, if you can convince them, it's shirts off and it's flesh to flesh. Because there is nothing more powerful than the flesh to flesh, skin on skin feeling. Because when you see that baby pressed up against the skin, it is so powerful. There's something deeply primal in that, which just triggers up all the connections in our brains in a way that this photo, cute and lovely though it is product photo. And if you happen to be the parents of this baby or related to this baby, it's going to look super cute. If you're not related to this baby, it doesn't look as cute as your own kids. But do a picture of a mother holding a baby or a father holding a baby, and it's skin on skin, and any parent looking at it, it will fire off all these neurons in the brain, and you just can't help but get that feeling and connection. And at that point then, your light, go for the soft light, go for the big window or the large soft box, neutral, darkish background. Allow that soft light to create beautiful, soft curves and shadows that emphasize, like you've got in here, you've got the softness of that skin with the way you've done the lighting. But use a single light, maybe a reflector if you really want to, but don't push it. You want the softness of a really large light source, like a large north-facing window or your large gridded softbox. And then I think you end up with something which is powerful at much, much higher level. Now, the tricky thing is the parents who will ask for a photo like this probably haven't really thought about it. They've asked for this kind of photo, you deliver this photo, they get that photo, they pay you for that photo, what's the harm? If I was asked to do a baby photo and they were asking for this, I may well even do photos like this because that's what they've asked for. But what I would also be doing is I would be trying to talk them into taking their shirts off and holding the baby skin to skin. Or if they absolutely refuse to do that, then it's at the very least face to face, nose to nose, touching. You want or cheek to cheek. You want that closeness, you want that intensity. And I think those photos, you get a few of those, and those are the ones which 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, when they're looking back at their photos of when little Junior was a baby, it will be those ones that will be the ones that will just grab their heart and that they will be so pleased that they had. So really, there's a whole, like I said, Russ, you're a good photographer, you know what you're doing with lighting, you've delivered everything you need to, that was asked of you here. I think if you're going to get asked to do more baby photos, this is the route you want to go down. Just get that personal bit in, try it out, and I almost guarantee, especially because you already know what you're doing with lighting, you will create some incredibly beautiful photos that will just make the parents want to weep when they look at them. Okay? So, I hope that's useful. I hope you found that interesting. And to anybody else who's thinking about doing this kind of photography, I hope you found that interesting too. Okay, let's take a little look. Got a few more comments here. April says, great shot of baby Louis. Robert says, adorable. VG says, beautiful baby, impish smile. Pat says, Louis is a honey. I think he's getting a little bored. April says, I get it, Kim. You like natural shots of babies. VG says, baby in a basket is definitely a product photography. I agree. April says, you've got the point about the parents with the babies. But if the parents are not meeting the attraction protocol, people will not appreciate it as much. It would only be for the family. But that's fine, April, because that's what baby photos are for. Baby photos are for the family. Now, okay, slightly different if this is an advertising campaign. If you've been commissioned to do an advertising, you need a cute little baby and you've got to have your little bottle of baby oil or baby product or whatever next to it, then the thing is, at that point, the baby is then back into being a product photo. But if you're talking about a baby photo for the parents, for the grandparents, it doesn't matter whether the parents are star models. They don't have to be. They're just ordinary people. They're real people. And they're real people with their baby. It's like this bit of, how many people don't have a lovely photo of their mum because their mum hates having their photo taken? You as the child, you as the daughter, the son, you don't care. That's your mum. You love your mum. It doesn't matter what she looks like to anybody else. She's your mum. You adore her, right? But you never end up with a photo of you with her because she hates how she looks, and that feels deeply sad. Flick that the other way, you're a parent. Your child desperately wants to have a photo of you with them. And it doesn't matter if you are self-conscious and you don't like the look of yourself. But the thing is, a new parent can quite often, you can get in on that bit. You can, while they're still kind of glowing with their newborn, while they're still new parents, they're maybe much more likely to be able to sort of go, and if you're doing close to close, and the attention is on the baby, but you can draw out that relationship between the parent and baby, then I think you've got a much, much higher chance of being able to succeed in doing it. For sure, you need to be able to be the kind of person who can talk and convince and relax, and primarily it's about trust. Every time you're doing portrait, if you do portraiture, then Portraiture is about trust. That you have to build a level of trust whereby the person on the other side of the camera is trusting you enough that they can relax. And when they relax, you get a good photo. It's when they're tense, you don't get a good photo. So if you build a good rapport with the parents and they are now trusting you and they've already seen that you've taken some lovely photos of little Junior or whatever, then it will be much easier to start talking them into that idea of creating photos which they didn't realise they want, but when you create it, they then absolutely adore and they will love you forever for having done it. Okay, and Russ says, I hadn't considered it that way, but you're absolutely right. It is product photography. I will put a photo on Facebook page about it. That might be more what you're talking about. Okay, that would be cool. I'd love to see that. VG says, thanks, Kim. Great inputs. Oh, right, heading off quickly, feeling terribly sleepy. Yep, we're coming to an end here. Russ says, that was a couple who looked online for the type of photo they were looking for. Great thought-provoking critique. I'm really glad that helped. And John says, great tips on baby portraits too. April says, totally makes sense. Cool. Excellent. Right, so that brings us pretty much to the end of this podcast. If you've enjoyed this, if you found this useful, if you found any of these tips and tricks and stuff helpful, then do consider supporting the podcast with buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Next week, I'm going to be talking about asymmetrical symmetry. Now, this is something I talked about way back at the beginning, something like about episode 4 or 5, so most of the people watching won't have seen it. But it's about that notion, it's a compositional trick about that notion of creating something which looks more or less symmetrical, but not quite. Now, I'm going to go into much more detail about this next week, but it's a really useful, interesting compositional device to understand. And then after I've talked about that, I'm going to set that as the challenge for the following week. So do make sure you tune in next week to find out what it is on earth I'm talking about. And also critique. There will be a critique slot next week. So if you would like to get your pictures in, get feedback on the actual photos, work out how they could be edited, change differently, or even just like we've been talking with Russ there, conceptually, what you might like to explore, then get your photos in as well. Thank you ever so much to everybody who's turned up this evening. Thank you to everybody who has submitted something. Thank you to everybody who's taken the time to comment and chat. And I think that's pretty much about it. Thank you. And I will see you all next week. And in the meantime, also in the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group. Obviously, if you don't belong to the Facebook, then and you still want to put images in, email them to me. You see my website here, kimayres.co.uk, kim@kimayres.co.uk will get the image to me. Cool. Thank you very much to everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.